instead of attorneys and doctors. I want to say this, that not only has the media created the problem, but the church in many cases has been compliant because we haven't spoken up against it. Amen. All right, I'll go back up. I'll continue now in the presentation. That was just my personal opinion. You don't have to agree. Thank you. But my point is that I think that we have to look at what's going on in our world and why more and more people are using drugs. And while these problems are persistent, let me just say this, is that society's changing views of drugs. Drugs are becoming more and more socially acceptable. Especially marijuana, we talked about, or we heard someone speak about the increased use of marijuana. It's being legalized everywhere. Eventually it will be legalized in North Carolina. I've heard people talking. I know there's a presenter that's going to talk about the situation in Colorado, but so I won't really mention that a whole lot other than to say that people need to look at some of those numbers and some of those stats, and I hope he brings some of that out. Because sometimes, people are talking, oh, well, this is great for the economy. Sometimes it's great for the economy because they're not using any of that money to pay for health care from the problems that are caused from the drug use that they're promoting. But I think that becomes the issue, and that's a conversation I think somebody else is scheduled to address, so I won't step on their toes. Good deal. I see. Is that you? It is. Oh, cool. I'm so glad. I will stick around for that. Local availability of drugs. And when I put the local availability of drugs, there's a couple things I was thinking about. I didn't finish writing that out because I moved it down some. But you can find drugs anywhere, in the homes, in the medicine cabinets, from the prescription drugs, which are one of the fastest growing drugs categories. Sure.
One of the interesting just observations, not only statistics, but the number of young people that have died of overdoses of sports drinks. They have so much, they get overcaffeinated and probably have ventricular arrhythmias and die because they just find them dead after, they're staying awake or whatever. I mean, there's only so much stress the body can take.
Great point, man. I wish I had time to really kind of work through some of this. But let me tell you what.
I just think at gas stations, that's one of the primary.
Oh, yeah. The sports drinks that are highly caffeinated, people are drinking those. And let me tell you what. We're seeing people show up in hospital and emergency rooms. Why? Because your heart can only take so much caffeine. That goes for coffee and almost all these sports drinks. What's in it? Caffeine. And high levels of caffeine are in these sports drinks, and people are taking them. And same with some other performance enhancement drugs, that the body is only set to do so much. And once you extend its capabilities for a long period of time, the body begins to break down until it just stops. And we see it happening more and more with young people, not only for the performance drugs, but for the stimulants and the stimulants that are in them. Because some of that is not just sports and for athletes. What's one of the other things that sports drugs do? They help you lose weight. So people are drinking the sports drinks and the caffeinated drinks to speed up their body metabolism to burn fat. So instead of exercising and doing things like that, we take the short route, or we take the shortcuts. And we're finding out that young people are thinking, okay, I'll just take the performance drugs. I'll take the stimulants. I'll do the energy drinks. I will stay up late and do the caffeine drinks until I pass out. From the heart problems, from the exhaustion issues, to the dehydration. And so that list goes on and on. And some of that's for looks. Some of it is for athletic ability. But it's one of those things that young people are doing more and more, and a lot of that's because they don't understand the consequences of doing it. Because we haven't done a really good job educating young people in regards to drugs and the negative side effects of drugs. And not only when we talk about drugs, the caffeine drinks, we could talk about colas and sodas and all of those with the high sugar content. All of that stuff is not good for your body and creates problems. And even mental health problems, because when you start trying to cut back on your sugar, your body has already become adjusted to that. And you start feeling the same symptoms as someone who is addicted to heroin. Why? Because it affects the same center of the same parts of the brain, the pleasure reward centers of the brain. So those are things that we have to consider. But other reasons, internet options. Man, before the internet, typically you had to go down to the street corner and get your drugs. With the internet, you can now order drugs, prescription drugs, and illegal drugs from almost anywhere in the world. From your home. You don't even have to leave home. You can have it mail ordered to you. And just what kind of challenge is that for the parent who is trying to raise their child up when their child's internet time isn't supervised? This isn't about that, but if I had time to talk about supervision of the internet, if you have young children, you're smiling. Why are you smiling back there when I said that?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just seeing the effects of unsupervised internet time and the habits it can wreak on a family.
Say that louder.
I've seen the effects that unsupervised internet time, even when families are trying to supervise the internet, the effects it can have on a family, on spirituality, on young men and on young women.
What are some of the effects you've seen?
I think it's very easy for children to get addicted to pornography at a very early age, even without intending to, because it's targeted especially at young boys, even at the ages of 8 and 9.
And you know what? You don't even have to go to a pornographic site. You hit a button for almost anything and boom, there it is in front of you. And, I haven't been saved all my life. Some of you haven't been saved all your life. And the only thing I can say is that, for the most part, I'm glad that I did not have internet when I was 8 or 9 years old. Because the temptation to stay away would have been more than my heart could bear. And it's more than a whole lot of 8, 9, 10-year-old little boys' hearts can bear. And if you're not talking to them about, one, their sexuality, their gender identification, pornography, and all of these things, the internet will. And you don't have to talk to your kids about it or promote it to your clients and your patients. If you're seeing people who are in their teenage years or preteen years as a physician, as a dentist, kind of talk to them a little bit, find out where they're at. Because sometimes they will tell you stuff they don't tell their parents. Because you're not a threat to them. You might be an inconvenience if they're getting a root canal, but you're not a threat. All right. The other thing, I want to hit on this one is just really the CBD issue. And how many of you are familiar with CBD? CBD, the magical cure-all. It's made from hemp. People say it's not addictive. And it reminds me of what you used to see in old Western movies. In some of the old Western movies where you see the guy coming through with a wagon, and on the side it would have snake oil that cured everything. This is what I think about CBD. Maybe I should have stepped down out of my box on that one because I'm not sure what your thoughts are. But I don't think there's enough research out on CBD and the effects of CBD for it to be marketed like it is. You can find CBD, for those of you who don't know what it is a cannabidol that is made from the hemp plant. It's not supposed to have any type of addictive nature in it like marijuana, but it's still part of the cannabis plant. So, my thought is that, it's still part of the cannabis plant, and people will begin to think, the cannabis plant is okay, and we're seeing more and more people take it, and they think it's phenomenal. It's sure.
Just regarding this, okay? We all have to believe, our mind is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And we all, inside, we want to believe in something. It is written in a said that for those who believe, everything is possible, okay? use like moonshine and they saw marijuana, and it was a medical solution for pain, and you wrote it. But I remember that when I was 8 years old. Now, back then, you do not believe that you need that just to be healed or just to be feeling better. The problem with society is you need to use this in order to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And then the problem is in people's mind. The problem is what they are feeding into their minds to believe that this is what they need in order to feel okay.
Well, you know, as you mentioned, one of the things that comes up is that, you know, the Bible says, as a man believeth, so is he.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of belief. And we've seen the studies, I've seen the studies, some of you have seen the studies that talk about how a person's faith, people who have more faith and a higher level of spirituality, is associated with faster healing. Because as you believe, your body begins to activate certain cells and certain parts of the brain begin to move in a certain way.
Immune system. They are thesis.
Thank you.
That has been, yes. And this coming from 20 years ago, because
Right.
I read those theses for psychiatric, and yes, it comes, whatever is coming into your mind, and also the Bible says, renew the spirit of your mind. And it is.
And once again, the Bible's a great psychological read. If you read it that way, because so much of what it says plays out. And especially when we talk about generational curses and we see some of the things with people who are born predisposed to different diseases. Okay. Oh.
They're coming.
Okay. Well, keep that in mind. But all right. So enough about that. We've seen some of the growth, but just keep in mind that when people begin to market any drug as a cure-all for everything and then begin to place it, notice where it's placed. You can go in clothing stores now and buy CBD oil. What does that say? It tells everyone that, oh, this is okay. It's okay, and it's not just the CBD oil. It lets people know it's okay to seek a pill or something chemical for a fix for whatever you need. Even in gummies, the CBD gummies that are made, and I'm thinking, whenever you think of gummies, you typically think about little children. So now for the little children who begin to think that, okay, taking this is okay. So what's their long-term view of drugs going to be? Or quick fixes going to be? Whenever I have a problem, I just need to go get something for it. I don't have to work through anything because now this will fix it. It becomes a false reality or alternate reality where the results creates people who are not capable of sustaining themselves through trials and tribulations of life without the aid of a chemical crutch. And that's one of the things that we have to address. All right, the substance use on the families, and as we talk through this, feel free to ask questions. Just look at two of the major issues I put. There's a long list of issues that drugs in the families cause, but the disruption of attachment, rituals, roles, routines, communication, social life, and finance, all of that's disrupted when there's a parent who has a drug issue. If there's a child who has a drug issue, we see the same things. But one of the things we see also that if there is a parent who has a substance use disorder, then we see more signs or we see more situations where there is sexual violence, domestic violence, child abuse. We're seeing this over and over. And the problem here is that it passes down to the third and fourth generation. We're seeing the cycles that don't stop. And if we don't step in to stop them and address these issues, my question is, who will? Who else is equipped to do it? Children of parents with SUDs are greater risk for depression, anxiety disorders, problems with cognitive, verbal skills, and parental abuse, as I've already mentioned. And once again, from generation to generation, it doesn't stop unless someone stops it. And it becomes the responsibility of those who are in positions of authority and power and influence. And when I say position and power, I don't necessarily mean an office or a titled office. I mean people who have influence in their life because of their roles and where God has placed them. People who can whisper in the ear of somebody or say something to somebody because they'll listen to you versus someone else. The impact of substance abuse on our communities, this is what it costs. For 2015, the U.S. Surgeon General reported the U.S. spent $442 billion a year in dealing with substance use in 2015. Today, the abuse of tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs costs over $740 billion annually. So, and I've seen numbers as high as $740 billion, as high as $800+ billion a year. So, from a community, as a member of the community, in recognizing that, taxpayers have to pay this, you're invested in the game or not, or whether you realize it or not. Did y'all pay attention to the slide before this and what it said? How many of you noticed what it said?
Addiction is not a spectator sport. Eventually the whole family gets to play.
Exactly. I do want to just go back to that if I can. All right. I think every way is going to be the wrong way, no matter where you is. All right. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is, what? This is why you need brothers and sisters in Christ, right here. Just keep this in mind. We can go down. We can spend a whole day talking about the negative impact of drugs on our families and our communities. But addiction is not a spectator sport. Eventually, the whole family gets to play. And that's one of the things I hope you remember, because it's the same thing with our communities. When we talk about families, we can talk about the extended family, the direct family, the traditional family. But keep this in mind. You can't avoid this. How many of you know somebody that has a mental health or drug issue or concern? And I would be willing to bet that all of us know someone. And we've seen the impact. Or we've seen some of our patients or some of our clients who we know have substance use concerns or mental health concerns. You can't avoid it. The only thing we can do is really address it. And I do want to say this, and I'll try not to spend too long. I thought a lot about this presentation, and then as I was working on it, the one thing that kept sticking in my mind was the story of the Good Samaritan. And most of you are probably familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan, and about how there were people who were in positions of power and leadership who had a chance to make a difference on a person's life. And they kept crossing the street to avoid the scenario, to avoid the person. And sometimes it's easier to do that. We can jump in our cars and in our vehicles and go into our fenced-in neighborhoods and all of that on the right side of town and try to block all of this out. But let me tell you what, there's somebody out on the street who's still suffering. And we've just driven past them. We've seen somebody come in our office where we could have made a difference, and sometimes we just go past them. And so, as I was working on this, that was staying there in my mind. I was thinking to myself, what would it take for us to be good neighbors? What would it take? Sure.
I think we have to think about the families and the children of people who are addicted to these drugs and who are in orphanages, who are in the foster care system. And one of the best ways we can step up is to take care of those children who are unfortunately geared to possibly as an adult have the same issues. And so to bring in strong families who can take care of these foster children, it makes a huge difference.
Anyone else? Thank you for that. I think you're right. We have to think about.
Pastor, I was just thinking how for our families to do well and our children to do well, somebody has to be inconvenienced, and sometimes that's us.
Exactly. I was sure.
I think the other thing that has to happen is that so many things are kept secret, whether it's sexual abuse in families or in work or addiction. And in my family personally, I have a tale of two addiction families. One who died from his cocaine overdose of a nephew just this last year. And the grief is 10 times harder because it wasn't just a death from something that was natural or a traumatic thing. The grief afterward and the constant is it's his story to tell, so I'm not going to tell. So that secret of what actually happened is just as much festering in this family as they're processing this terrible thing. The tale of the second family is my own family of a grandson who recently got admitted to rehab for alcohol addiction at 19 or 18 years old. He had the courage to say, I have a problem, I need help, and he went to rehab. But even in that family, my family, the secret is there. And it's his story to tell, so we're not going to tell it, meaning parents and brothers and sisters. And I think a big part of all of the issues that are sin-related is our overwhelming urge to keep it a secret. And that one thing alone, I think, if we told the truth in love to each other, as well as to the face of the public, could really change how we approach all sin in general. And we don't do that enough. And I think that is a huge problem in general, societally, because of the way things look. And, you know, pride is one of those things that God tells us about over and over. I've been reading Proverbs lately. And the arrogance that we have as people, which is our pride, which keeps these things inside, in the family, in our circles of secrets. And I believe Satan works in secrets.
Well, you know, thank you for that. And you are on target because the research and data in regards to substance use treatment talks about one of the biggest issues is isolationism, where people will separate themselves and they keep it a secret because of shame and guilt and the negative stigmas associated with substance use. And so they don't want anyone to know. And we think about, let me ask you this, how many times have you suffered in secret because you didn't want to tell somebody something or you didn't want somebody else to know? And it would have been so much easier. You feel free to raise your hand on that if you want. I saw somebody raise your hand. You know, yeah. But it's one of those things that, you know, man, we got to open up and say, you know what? I'm not perfect. I learned this years ago when I first started pastoring after about, you know, probably about my second year.